Hi. Listen, I've made some heavy videos over the last couple of weeks, so I reckon that this week I'd lighten things up a bit by telling you how to shrink a human head. A skill nobody should be without. Head shrinking is a practice that went on in the Amazon into the 20th century. In fact, there are photos of tribesmen with a shrunken head hanging around their neck. And you don't get the privilege of walking around with a shrunken head around your neck if it wasn't you that shrank it. Now, I found a photo here, for example, of a guy with a head on a stick. I couldn't actually find any photos online of guys with one hanging around the neck, but I've seen them in books. They do exist. Now, I say I'm going to tell you how to shrink a head. I did try to get hold of a severed head to actually demonstrate the process, but apparently it's against the law. You might want to get yourself a severed head and follow along. If you're a married man, for example, you might think about your mother-in-law. I don't know. Maybe if you're a Man United fan, like my brother, you could find a Man City fan. But the only thing I actually would add to that, just to be absolutely sure, is I'm only joking. Don't go and get a severed head. Look, you might not like your mother-in-law, but the chances are your wife does. Yeah, just leave her be. Now, there are still elderly shaman in the Amazon today who are pissed off at white man and how white man arrived here and saw that practice went on and called them barbarians. So what? Well, isn't it true that like white man used to like arrest people and flay them alive and burn them at the stake and put them through all manner of unmentionable torture just because they said they didn't believe in Jesus? Isn't it true that white man used to like round people up by the thousand and take them to the gas chambers and then burn the bodies in mass crematoria? Seriously? And they come here and call us barbarians? The real beef they have, the shamans, with it is that see, you might be mistaken for thinking that Amazonian tribesmen used to wander around the forest just lopping a head off at will and going off and shrinking it. But that wasn't the case at all, you see. First of all, there's only one tribe in the Amazon jungle that actually used to carry out that practice. Now, that tribe covered a big area, sort of, that stretched about 300 miles from Ecuador right down to Iquitos, where I am. That tribe was called the Hibiru. And if you do your own research into shrunken heads, you might find 2 or 3 other tribes listed that used to do it. But they were all really factions of the Hebrew tribe. It was the Hebrews that used to do it. And the other very important thing that the shamans even today harp on about is that they didn't lop heads off at will. What they used to do is if they were in battle against an enemy tribe, and only when they found themselves pitted against an enemy warrior who was considered formidable, and they killed him, only then was it valid to take his head off and then take it back to the village to shrink it. And it was quite a brave process, really, because after they killed the enemy warrior, they had to take the head off, but this was amid battle. So there were poison darts and arrows and spears flying around and hand-to-hand combat as well with knives. So it was quite an ordeal just trying to get hold of the head. And I guess then they had to kind of put the head to one side somewhere so they could remember where it was, because the battle wasn't finished yet. Yeah. You got to picture the scene. You got to picture the scene. You get back to your village from the battle, okay? Your wife comes running over. She's like, "Oh, I can't believe you survived. Oh, you're okay. I'm so happy." And you're going, "Yeah, yeah. Oh, it was terrible. You wouldn't believe it. But hey, look what I got. Look what I got." The wife's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, nice. Oh, don't be like that. You have no idea what I went through to get this." Yeah, You're hungry? Yeah, so kind of all fed and watered. There might be like 6 or 8 warriors that have come back and they've got a head, okay? So what the shaman's got to do then, he then gathers all these guys together and sits them round in a semicircle, and he sits there in the middle and starts his shamanic process, yeah? Which is to initially to protect the warriors from the enemy shaman, because the enemy shaman is going to be using his brujeria, that's his witchcraft, that's his black magic, to cast spells on these warriors who've taken a head away, you see. They've got to be protected. Of course they've got to be protected. The whole thing's about spirit, you see. The reason they separated the head from the body is if you hadn't done that, the enemy would have taken their dead warrior away. They would have buried his body, and then his spirit could have come back and placed a curse on you and your family. So that's the first step. The first step is to separate the head from the body. That way you've got the spirit on one side, you've got the body, the spirit of the head on one side, you've got the spirit of the body on the other side, and you've got time. You've got time on your hands. However, if you were just to discard that head, bury that head, and they bury the body, the spirit from both sides could come back and join up, you see, and then you've got the same problem. That's why they had to then go through the process of shrinking the head. Now, the shaman's got his leaves, his chakapa, and he's singing his songs, and then once he's got the protection out of the way, then he's got to bring big clay pots, big enough to cook a head in, yeah? Now, there's a couple of things to note before we get down to the nuts and bolts of the actual process of shrinking the head. The first one is you can't shrink a head if it's still got the skull inside. The skull doesn't shrink, okay? So what you've got to do is you've got to remove all the skin, complete with the hair, from the entire skull. First of all, you can discard the skull then, okay? You've left the tongue in the skull, you've left the eyeballs in the skull. You don't want them, you're not going to shrink them. You're just going to shrink what's left of the head, the whole skin that's around it, okay? That's the important thing. The difficult thing, though, is the flesh, the muscle, is actually very firmly fixed down to the skull. It's not an easy thing to remove. So what you've got to do, first of all, is you've got to boil the head, okay? You've got to boil the whole thing, complete with the skull inside. That's the first part of the process. However, you actually don't want to boil it. What happens is the shaman brings you a clay pot, okay? And then sort of 2/3 fills it with water. You've got to place the head inside. The shaman has added his secret blend of herbs and spices to the water, okay? Only the shaman knows it. It's kind of like KFC. And then you've got to put the whole thing on a wood fire and bring the temperature of the water up, but don't let it boil. If you let it boil, then fat oozes out of the skin and the hair falls out. And how stupid you're going to look walking around with a shrunken head around your neck and it's not got no hair, it's bald. Huh? You want the hair in. You want the hair in the in the head. So you're watching the pot, okay? The pot's on the fire. You're watching it very carefully. Don't let it boil. Don't let it boil, okay? When it starts just kind of sparkling, just ready to simmer, that's when you've got to take it off the heat, okay? Very important at that point. I've explained why, okay? And let it cool down a little bit. You don't want to stick your hands in there. It's very hot, yeah? And once it's cooled down, you can take the head off. And what you want to do, I'll just remove my glasses to kind of demonstrate a little bit here, okay? What you want to do, you want to take a sharp knife and you want to cut from here, kind of the bridge of the nose, cut up right the way around the back there, right down to where the kind of neck used to attach to the body. That way you can peel all the head off very carefully. It comes away quite easily after the cooking process, yeah, which is, yeah, that's good. Then you've got to sew it back up, okay? Then you've got to sew all this cut that you made here, you've got to sew it back up, so you're left with a sack, okay? Left with a kind of gruesome sack. You want to sew up the mouth because you don't want the head to be able to make any noises to give any clues to the enemy shaman, okay? sew the mouth up. You want to sew the eyes up as well so it can't see anything, okay? I mean, you've left the eyeballs in the skull, but still, you never know, okay? We're talking about spirit here. Then when you've got this sack, you've got to hold it like that, and very carefully, you want to fill it with boiling hot sand, okay? You've heated sand up on a fire, and you want to put that inside and fill it up, okay? Then you've got a head shape again, you know? It was all a bit kind of floppy and saggy because the skull's not in it anymore, okay? But once you get the sand in there, it fills it out a little bit, you see? It's good. And the heat of the sand is what actually begins the shrinking process. Now, before it starts to shrink too much, you've got to kind of stand the head up as best you can. Don't let too much of the sand fall out, okay? And you've got to get like a spatula and you've got to start shaping at the face because the skull's not there anymore. It loses its shape. So you've got to use your memory to kind of shape it all nice to make sure that it looks like it did, you know, at the point you cut the head off. That's a very important thing. You want it to look nice. Now, once you think you've got it nicely shaped, okay, then you can take the sand out because the sand's been cooling down now and you need to replace it with more hot sand and keep that process. And they say the whole process used to take up to kind of 5 or 6 days to shrink the head down. But once you've got the head shrunk down, job done. That's you. You've got your shrunken head.